We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. The 2022-2023 NBA season is here upon us. Optimism is abound. Ready to get into it. Salute Knicks Nation. Salute to the chat. And I'm joined by the one, the only, the two Long Island legends, MARC BERMAN and EJ. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
I'm doing great, but I'm here in Florida right now, enjoying 85 degrees. But I know I miss October weather in New York. There's nothing better than fall foliage.
It's about to be 30 degrees tomorrow, so
I
you're
will
missing a
miss
lot. You're missing quite a bit. It's good to see you, Mark. We've missed you for a long time. There's been a lot of chatter on Nick's Buzz asking where Mark is, but we just wanted to have you here and salute to an amazing career. And thank you so much for making time for us today.
Yeah, thanks, EJ and CT for inviting me. Day before the season opener, this will be on national TV. I'll be able to see every moment of it. I was able to watch most of the preseason also, so I have a pretty good take on the club. And Listen, Mike Vaccaro just did his season preview column, and he says, "Who are the Knicks? What are the Knicks?" Even he doesn't really know. So there's a lot of questions to be answered.
Definitely the big great unknown, and that's the beautiful thing. On the eve of the season tip-off, everyone's an expert and everyone's full of optimism as well. We're going to get your predictions, gentlemen. I'm going to put you both on the spot. Don't worry about that. Yeah, you've seen the preseason, Mark and EJ. Since we last spoke, the Knicks played 4 games, and I'll start with Mark. What stood out to you, Mark? What was, I guess, the three biggest takeaways from the Knicks preseason action before we look into the season opener?
Well, I was reaching out to a couple of scouts the last couple of days, and listen, the Knicks played 4 teams that weren't in even the play-in last year. Indiana twice, Detroit once, Washington. So preseason is preseason, but you had to love Jalen Brunson. But I was never concerned about Jalen. I always thought he was going to come in and be the floor general and give leadership and make things easier. I'm just still concerned about Julius and RJ as a chemistry tandem. Neither are great 3-point shooters. Both like to dribble the ball to the basket, and there's only one ball, and I'm just worried about chemistry. But listen, in preseason, it's been written about a lot in the New York Post and other places. Julius moved the ball. He looked like a team player. He was not a team player last year. His mind was somewhere else. He was disgruntled. He was sensitive. I just feel that he comes in with a completely new outlook, and that's their best chance of getting into the top 10 because the Eastern Conference is so strong that even though the Knicks are going to be better, the East is too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely, EJ.
There's a lot I'm probably going to piggyback off what Mark said. Definitely Jalen Brunson. The idea of having a true point guard was so big. I mean, I think that with the Donovan Mitchell conversation that dominated the summer, the will he, won't he, we may have forgotten how big of a pickup it was. And the fact that it actually happened was a major accomplishment for this front office. And I know that sometimes with Knicks fans, it's not popular to compliment a front office when they do something well, but actually getting a point guard that is a solid point guard, a point guard that isn't over the hill, a point guard that doesn't have injury concerns, that was big. And seeing it actually take place during the preseason was a major plus. Much like Mark, I'm a little bit concerned about RJ and Julius, but I do think that there is a minor positive that we saw, the fact that when Jalen was on the floor, Julius kind of had a niche that was carved for him, but also understood for the most part, it's going to be Jalen's show. He's going to run the show. And that to me breeds a lot of confidence, knowing that Julius might actually have more of a defined role as opposed to being the everyman. The other little takeaway, and it's a little bit of a concern, is the IQ Derrick Rose situation. That left me with a bunch of questions. IQ at times seemed a little bit overwhelmed. IQ seemed a little bit at times like he was forcing his shot, and it seems as if he's not quite clear in terms of his ability or in terms of what he's doing. And Derrick Rose seeming to have a little bit of an injury issue, at the start of the preseason, will that also bleed then into the regular season? So those are my three major takeaways.
Yep, great points you gentlemen raised. For me, the preseason definitely makes me feel more optimistic about the season. Mark made a great point about the opposition, which we really won't be able to have a full gauge as to how strong this team really is. But I think there's potential there to really surprise. They're getting some favorable rankings, gentlemen. Ranked 18 in the latest power rankings. That raised some eyebrows. Mark, the ESPN projections had the Cleveland Cavaliers just one win above the New York Knicks.
Wow.
Did you see that
That's
at
really
42.5? That was the Kevin Pelton, the analytics projection, I think.
Wow. I mean, some of the people I've spoken to, in the off season after the Donovan trade, they said Cleveland's going to be real strong with Garland, Donovan in the backcourt with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and LeVert. I mean, that's a team to watch out for, and they were strong last season. So, as much as this person, one scout in particular said, listen, I understand why the Knicks held back their assets, but give Cleveland credit. They were maybe that piece away from being really, really good. I'm surprised to hear they were so low in the rating.
Yeah. EJ, your thoughts? But yeah, that is just the ratings, and there's always teams that are really projected to be really good, like Atlanta last season. Just couldn't quite put it together.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're taking into account how there's been a trend recently in the NBA, maybe even going back to the Heatles and LeBron, where when there's a major acquisition, there's a rough adjustment period in terms of defining roles. So you remember, the Heat got off to a really rough start with LeBron and Chris Bosh. LeBron again in the LA Lakers when he got there. So I wonder if there's an extent to which for Cleveland, they're taking into account that there might be a 10-game, 20-game, 30-game stretch where the team is really trying to figure out its identity. Similarly, I think that there might be a couple of other teams that, for example, Chicago, that's already dealing with injury concerns. There's Boston with regards to what happens with Ime Udoka. And what do we know about the Celtics coaching situation, and will that have an impact on the roster? So, does that influence a game or two? In terms of the Knicks probably maybe stealing a game or two, because to the extent that there wasn't that much roster turnover for the Knicks this year. It's kind of surprising when you think about it, but maybe that's the rationale behind some of those positioning. But I know we're going to talk about our over-unders and what we think it was going to be the win total, but that may make sense.
Yeah, the East is definitely so much stronger. 37 wins last season, gentlemen. We know a lot went wrong. Derrick Rose's health, the crumbling down the stretch, the poor free throw shooting. That's been a big positive, Mark, in the preseason. Some gentlemen shooting better, from the free throw line. And Mitchell Robinson has been really impressive. Any players stand out to you so far in the preseason from what you expected coming in?
Well, Mitchell looked great, but he still can't shoot a jump shot. And again, when I was talking about the chemistry concerns, you have RJ and Julius who aren't great three-point shooters. Mitchell can't shoot a 6-footer still. You might have spacing concerns, even though Jalen can shoot the three. But yeah, Mitchell was just a beast. And, Thibodeau calling him the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. He wouldn't say that late last season when the Knicks still hadn't locked him up long-term. But now Tom is comfortable to say it. I think he felt it late last season that Mitchell was such a force on the offensive boards. And that's one of the reasons why the Knicks really wanted to lock him up. The one negative thing about the preseason that I didn't mention, Derrick Rose didn't play a lot, and I think EJ mentioned the early injury, but, one scout said, he looked a little old. He is old, but 2 years ago, he looked like he was 25 again. And that was a major, major reason why the Knicks were the fourth seed, 41 and 31. So, mention the Derrick IQ thing. Is Derrick going to be close to the player from 2 years ago? We know he lost a lot of weight, but, that doesn't amount to anything if he's not playing the type of basketball that he did 2 years ago. IQ is, to me, he's a big X factor. He's such a streaky shooter, and I feel he's just a little too selfish. I wish he was a little more of a distributor, but he's a scoring point guard or whatever he is. I don't even know what position he is, but he's just too streaky from that three-point line. The Knicks need him to be a consistent force from deep. Because that bench, I thought on paper going into preseason, I said, oh, well, the big strength is the bench. And then it turned out the starters outplayed the bench. And that horrible loss in Indiana where they collapsed, the bench collapsed down the stretch was a bad sign. And if IQ is not playing well, do you finally go to Miles McBride, who is a distributor? He's a better defender, and he's a team player. And I just wonder about IQ. Is quickly enough of a team player right now as he goes into his third season?
Oh, I got to jump on that. Yeah. Mark, Mark, like when you mentioned Miles McBride, I mean, that boy, that man, he's a man, but he really showed some dog on defense. He was after it. And I could almost imagine a world where it's possible, like we went from talking about, was IQ going to be the starter for this season to, is it possible that Miles McBride might actually like overtake him as, your backup point guard? Because the defense he played this preseason, and I forget which game it was. It might've been the Indiana game where, his aggression, and there's something about, he has that dog in him, that clear, he wants to go after, he's getting after it, and in a way that's not necessarily hurting the team. And I think the X factor probably is IQ in terms of what will he be, particularly because he's not too far away from discussing that rookie contract and an extension. So it's not too early to start thinking about what will this season be for IQ. Is he pressing in terms of understanding like the team might be making moves for next season in terms of evaluating him?
Wow, contract extension for IQ. We got the New York Post has got to get you on speculating all this. Yeah, I know.
I'm ready.
It is a tough question. What is IQ going to be worth, in that situation? 25th pick in the draft, but he's played mostly like a lottery pick for, if you redraft it, I don't know exactly where he'd fall. It would be a good Knicks newsletter to do, to redraft the 2020 draft. But IQ and his contract extension is going to be a very big topic by the beat writers going forward.
Yeah. And just touching on the bench and the starting unit, that's the big story for me, gentlemen, as well. We could be looking at a season where the starters were the last year's bench, basically. It's no doubt we're getting out the gate quicker. The third quarter of doom, hopefully, is a thing of the past. And Tom Thibodeau has to be the most pleased guy in that locker room, having that point guard, Mark. Jalen Brunson's impact now. The New York Knicks, he's been their man all along. They've got him. The point guard play and the starting unit looks much better. Can Jalen Brunson be an all-star this season? I think there's a chance.
Yeah, if the Knicks are winning, no doubt Jalen will be considered. I don't think RJ is going to really have a shot at that, but I think Jalen, if the Knicks are a 500 or better team, I think they'll look at Jalen because of his impact on winning. Listen, best point guard the Knicks have had since maybe Marbury on paper. He's a winner. And that's the biggest thing that Tom Thibodeau loves about him. He's won on every level back to high school. And they needed that leadership quality. They needed that floor general on the court. They had none of it last season. Kemba Walker, I guess Detroit had to waive him. I don't think he's found a home, or I haven't been on the internet recently. But the fact that Kemba Walker couldn't even find a home this season just shows what a drastic mistake Leon Rose made. Kemba has a lot of nice qualities, but he's not a floor general, was never a floor general. Even in his prime, he was a scoring point guard, and he lost his explosiveness. So then he became a big negative, especially defensively. So as long as Jalen continues to play dogged defense, I was told in the offseason, one of Tom's biggest goals was to make Jalen a better defender. He knew everything about Jalen as a leader and as a playmaker and a shooter. He wanted to make him a better defender, and so far, so good.
Yeah, great points. And EJ, and then throw it back to Mark. But I got a question for both of you. You know, Mark mentioned that some scouts think, or some scouts felt that Jalen Brunson has peaked. But I'm sort of questionable with that. 26, 27 years old, wanted a bigger role with the Knicks outside of Luka Doncic. Maybe there is another gear. I think there is another gear Jalen Brunson could go to, especially if the pull-up three-point shooting, grows.
No, I totally agree. I don't understand why, he hasn't hit the age of 30 yet. And I think in the NBA, we start talking about someone's prime, like prime years starting around age 27, 28. So there's a lot of growth and development that can take place, especially in terms of creativity. There's a definite amount of creativity we've already seen from Jalen. Likewise, what's fascinating is he'll have the ball in his hands during crunch time. There won't be that Luka equivalent who might steal minutes, who might steal plays, who might steal possessions from him. And so it's going to be fascinating knowing that he's going to have the ball in his hands for the most part. And I can only imagine that role continuing throughout the course of the season. Whereas in Dallas, there would be players where it's going to be Luka. He's going to control the action. He's going to really run what's going to be taking place. So what can Jalen Brunson be? I think it's going to be really exciting. And I think maybe the Donovan Mitchell saga had to play out the way that it did so that we could all be pleasantly surprised by what Jalen Brunson does this season. Because I think many of us, because we were so fascinated by what was the possibility of Jalen and Donovan playing together, maybe we might have underappreciated that move. But this will be his opportunity to steal not only some of the shine, but also steal some of that limelight and being able to say, this is definitively my team.
Yeah, just your question saying that I wrote that scouts said he had peaked. It was more the Dallas Mavericks thought he had hit his ceiling, and that's why they weren't willing to go as far as the Knicks, although they never had a chance because as the NBA continues to investigate, this deal allegedly was done before free agency began. So Cuban didn't really have a chance to meet with Jalen once free agency began to counter offer. But their company spin at the time, or off the record, the spin was, we think that Jalen may have peaked and we weren't willing to go too crazy on a new contract. Cuban could wind up regretting it. They're going to have to depend on Spencer Dinwiddie and Tim Hardaway Jr. to pick up the slack from Jalen alongside Doncic. If Dallas slips this season, a lot of people will be pointing at, should they have re-signed Jalen? They were in the driver's seat for a long, long time before the Knicks swept in.
Yep. Their losses, the Knicks gain. And certainly if Jalen can take Julius Randle closer to what he was 2 seasons ago, that impact's going to be profound on the Knicks. And I think the Knicks' strength, Mark and EJ, is their depth this season. We talked about the unknowns with Quickly, Derrick Rose. We'll talk about the starting wing spots and that. But the depth this season, especially with Tom, hopefully more willing to play reduced minutes with the starters and spread the minutes around, Mark. We saw a preseason minutes distribution that was quite pleasant surprise for me. And I hope this season that, especially with Jalen Brunson and Randall, their minutes are down a bit.
Yeah, well, also he held back on Derek, wanting to rest Derek and not waste him in the preseason. So if Derek's getting bigger minutes, that could affect others. I know it's a big topic, and listen, Obi Toppin will get a lot of minutes or more minutes if he's hitting his three-point shot. He's not a good enough defender to be out there and steal away minutes from Julius if Julius is playing very productively. And if Julius is playing just average ball this year, good to very good, Obi will find his way in the court, but he didn't shoot well. Obi did not shoot well from the 3-point line in preseason. I know, looking at all the highlights, all the dunks and fast break dunks, and he looks like Mr. Superstar, but there's more to the game than that. And again, a big X factor is him being able to drill the 3-pointer. He's very streaky. He seems to lose confidence sometimes in that shot. But yeah, listen, he gives the team a lot of energy, a lot of intangibles. But everyone wants to see him play as many minutes as Julius. It's not going to happen.
EJ?
I'm processing this. I'm processing. I'm downloading it. I texted CT during the summer, and I was like, during the preseason, I'm like, man, Obi is making me excited. Like, if there's a consistency in his game, it's very exciting. And I think that, unfortunately, we will always have, as Knicks fans, at least for the next few seasons, we'll be measuring Obi in relationship to Randall. And that's what makes it difficult, is that, as Randall goes, so do Obi's minutes. And I don't know if the opposite is necessarily true. So I think that's what's going to make it very difficult this season. It's almost as if we need Julius to kind of do somewhat poorly for Obi to get more minutes, because of that reluctance on the part of Coach Thibodeau to play both of them at the same time. But I do agree that at some point the Knicks have to kind of figure out how much are they going to commit to Obi to see, is this a worthwhile investment? Frankly, I want to see Obi play, but Mark, you are right. The reality is that if Julius is going to play, that's going to come at the expense of Obi minutes. So it's almost as if we would have to go back into time, and obviously we can't do that, and pass up on Obi because of that decision. Like, if you're going to commit to Julius, you're stifling opportunities for minutes for Obi. You can't have both, and we can't have both of them playing 30 minutes if Coach Thibodeau does not want to play both, one at 4 and one at 5.
Yeah, it's the structural flaw of this organization right now. Yeah. And obviously they should have taken Halliburton, but that's ancient history. And another thing about playing Randall a lot is, listen, the Knicks are still open to trading the guy.
Yeah.
And if you start really reducing him, his trade value gets lower and lower. So there are other reasons to be a little patient in terms of keeping Obi not in a 24-24 split of the game.
Yeah, with that said, with the Obi-Randall dynamic, we know how big this year is with that situation, gentlemen. Mark, have you been hearing, how does Obi's camp feel about this situation? Have you, obviously he's coming into a very important year, and we'll know more this season. But in terms of that situation, I think all sides have to feel like something's got to give, right? This season, something has got to give with that.
Yeah. Well, ironically, they're both CAA. Obi, in fact, one of the reasons why the Knicks were able to draft him, in my opinion, is Cleveland backed off at 5. CAA really wanted to see Obi with the Knicks, and he dropped. Julius is Aaron Mintz's client, and Aaron and Leon are very tight. So that's the other thing. The two CAA guys in this battle at the power forward. But you're right, something has to give. Tom still does not see a 4-5 combination defensively. Obi, I don't think, can play the 3. I know I see a lot of Twitter people saying put Obi at the 3. I don't think he could do it defensively. The problem with Obi, he's not a very good team defender. I don't want to offend these Obi fans, but his defensive basketball IQ is not very strong. And that's one of the concerns the coaching staff has with Obi. How CAA is handling this, that's a great question, because, again, Randall, Obi, 2 CAA players.
Yep.
Have you heard? I'm sorry, CT.
Yeah.
I just want to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Have you heard any conversations about front office conflict over Obi and his position on the roster, or is it, just quiet? There's nothing on that front.
Well, it is a great question. There is so much conflict in the front office on everything, including mostly the Donovan Mitchell situation. But I do feel that there was a consensus that if we can move Julius in this past off season, they would gladly do so. There was just not any interest there. Nothing, no package made any sense. So, they say, let's roll it with Randall and hope that his head is back to where it was 2 years ago. But in terms of front office conflict, is Wesley pushing for Obi? I don't know. I mean, quite possibly, but I have nothing I've heard recently. Plus, I'm retired, kind of, so I'm not exactly making a lot of phone calls these days.
Yeah. Not retired from Knicks chatter, right. Basically. Yes. You'll always be attached to this team, and we'll address that at the end of the show. But definitely, ladies and gentlemen, we're joined by Marc Berman and EJ as well as we kick off the 2022-2023 season. It's going to be a big season for this franchise as well. Let's talk a bit about the starting wing spot. Evan had a pretty solid preseason, missed a game or two, but Quentin Grimes didn't exactly have the greatest preseason either. So, and then the Cam Reddish, situation mark. Cam Reddish got a chance, but didn't quite, look the part. So, what are your thoughts on the starting wing spot? I have a feeling Evan Fournier will get the start opening night because Quentin Grimes is now just announced that he's going to miss with a foot injury.
Yeah, very tough camp for Quentin. Listen, Cam Reddish, how many excuses are we going to come up with for this guy? This was a gigantic training camp for him. Forget about the potential of a contract extension, just to get in the rotation. And he did get hurt a little bit, but he also just didn't seem to fit in very well chemistry-wise. His shot was off. He seemed a little – listen, he's been with the team, since last January. So he should know the guys. It hasn't been a big turnover of players, but Cam is out of the rotation unless there's injuries. And listen, there's always injuries. So Quentin is out. We'll see if Tom, though, goes to a 9-man rotation and Cam is not playing. But, Cam Reddish, we know from the people I've talked to around Cam, he wasn't happy with the situation in the offseason. And it will be interesting to see if there's a taker for Cam Reddish, if the Knicks can make a trade. I know, someone wrote the other day, or the Knicks gave up a first-round pick for Cam. Well, it was a very heavily protected first-round pick that may not even convey. It's so heavily protected. So
it was worth the flyer.
Listen, they gave up Kevin Knox, who looks like he may be in the Detroit rotation and be a little bit of a contributor there, and Kevin will be in at the Garden in a few days. But they didn't give up anything really for Cam of major value. But I just don't see it with Cam and the Knicks. Tom is not a big fan, and we've been through that. But as far as this, Evan is the starting wing. Will he finish the game? Probably not. He wasn't great in preseason. He's a good spot-up three-point shooter. He could get to the basket here and there. He's not a defensive player, and that's the biggest concern for the coaching staff.
Yeah, you mentioned that, EJ and Mark. Obviously, if Evan starts, he offers the Knicks the shooting and all of that, we know. But is Tom willing to – the big story this season is Tom willing to make the right adjustments at the right time? Just because Evan starts the season doesn't mean 10 games in. If the Knicks don't start great, then Tom doesn't make an adjustment. And then Mark also makes that great point about finishing the games out. If you start, doesn't mean you finish. So it's going to be a long season ahead. But the key thing for me is Tom Thibodeau and his, willingness to make adjustments compared to the last two seasons.
I think that this season, we talked about this at the end of last season. I think that for Tom Thibodeau, this is a very, very important season. I think that's one of the easiest takes that we'll make on this podcast all day. I think it would be a dereliction of duty if he decides that he's going to be incredibly stubborn and not show the flexibility of moving or having a rotation that reflects the hot hand. I think that part of the rotation decided itself with the preseason, Cam's performance during the preseason really left a lot to be desired. And with Quentin being injured, with Grimes being injured, it kind of makes it kind of clear Evan's going to be playing minutes. I think the decision that will really be illustrative of Tom Thibodeau's season, though, is who closes out the game. What's going to be that closing lineup at the end of the game? Is he going to stick Evan because of offense, or is he going to go with a smaller lineup? Is he going to play Randall at what position? Is he going to be a 4? Is it going to be Hartenstein, or is it going to be Mitch? I think those are really the questions. Who starts is a very easy answer at this point. But who's going to finish is really going to be the piece that decides what happens to Tom at the end of this season. Will he be around for 2023, 2024?
EJ, it's a great point about the finishing lineup, because last year, or not, rather 2 years ago, it was Derrick Rose on the court at the finish, and now you got Jalen there, and Jalen and Derrick as a tandem. I don't know how you do it. I just don't think Evan will be on the court in the finish. If IQ is having a big game, I will give Tom, I think one of his strong points, and I think some Twitter followers or listeners will disagree with this, but I feel that Tom has a very good feel for who should finish a game, pending on what is going on in that game. The worst part of David Fizdale was he had no feel. He was a great assistant coach, great personality. The players loved him, great people skills. But for some reason, down the stretch of games, he always had the wrong player out on the court, I felt. I didn't feel he sensed what was going on. I think Tom is very good at that, and he's got a lot of choices. And you mentioned the new center, Hartenstein, for shooting, and he's not a bad defender. Should he be on the court instead of Mitchell, who can make a 5-footer? So, I mean, he could probably make a 5-footer, but he can't make anything from 10 feet on for sure. So it is a very difficult situation for Tom to figure out that closing unit.
Yeah. With that said, I mean, fans understand that no one can push the right button every single time, but what they do want a coach to do is hold players accountable. Accountability is key, right? If a player is hot, ride that hot hand that night. If they give you the best chance to win and they've got you back in the game, do they deserve to finish the game out? And Tom is usually stick to a very rigorous substitution pattern where he brings the starters back in all the time.
Yeah. I think you're referring more to Randall than anything. I don't think he was that set in his ways on other players, but that will be something to watch on. When Obi is hot, do you keep him in the game, or do you yank out that hot player for a cold Randall who's having a bad game? Last season, he put back Randall. He had tremendous faith in Randall. He lived and died with Randall all season and eventually died with him. 2 years ago, he knew Randall was the main reason they were 41-31, and he couldn't get that out of his head.
Yep.
It goes back to this idea that we discussed earlier about the flawed nature of this roster, where, the fact that, we're still having, it's almost as if like several of the questions that we're asking at some point goes back to the idea of this being a somewhat flawed roster. So like the Obi Randall conundrum, the Evan versus Quentin Grimes, there's that flawed nature of that roster all over again. And so it almost feels as if, like, while we were waiting for Donovan Mitchell, that trade to take place, it's almost as if those other pieces that had to be resolved, those other decisions that had to be resolved, weren't quite fully fleshed out. And they were kind of like, we'll see what happens during the season, but it then creates these problematic situations when we're discussing, like, for example, end game rotations, or, the role of Cam Reddish, and the fact that we resigned ourselves to maybe it's not going to pan out. It's a function of this somewhat flawed roster that we have at the beginning of the season.
Which is why Tom Thibodeau really wanted to see that Donovan Mitchell trade happen. I mean, that's just fact.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Where he is in his tenure with the team, he would have loved that upgrade. But, he's very happy with the upgrade we did make with Jalen Brunson. And with that said, we'll talk about some projections now, gentlemen. The preseasons hasn't really changed my projection of 45 wins, around the 10-7 range kind of thing. Nothing would shock me. Obviously, we've seen what we saw 2 years ago, gentlemen. But Mark and EJ, give us your win projections now, and in wins and over and under.
Yeah, I'm going to be optimistic for a change.
Oh.
No, it's not that optimistic. But listen, I think they're a play-in team. I think they're a 9th place play-in team. I think their final record, and even if they don't make the play-in tournament, I think they could hit 40 wins, 40 and 42, because even with 4 games left and they're out of it, Tom Thibodeau is still going to be playing the starters, like 40 minutes a night. So I think they could get to 40 wins. I think the last over-under was someone emailed me some things today. It was maybe 38.5. So if I'm in Las Vegas right now, I am going over with the Knicks with 40 and a 9th place play-in position. But I don't think they're going to get out of the play-in round. I think, and as people always forget, if you're in the play-in round, you still could be in the lottery very easily. I think the Knicks are going to be in the lottery again. But finish 9th place, not get through, fall back to the lottery.
And I got some follow-ups to that after EJ gives us.
I am going to make this not just based upon the roster projections, but also some of the more recent events that have taken place. So, for example, Chicago, what's been happening recently with Chicago, in terms of looking at Charlotte and some possible regressions with Charlotte, and I'm going to venture out and say about 42 and 40 or 43 and 38. I'm sorry, it's 39. So
you got to pick one of them.
I have to pick one. All right, so I'm going 42.
Yeah.
Love you, Mark. So I'm going to go 42 and 40. 42 and 40.
Okay, nice. All right. Yep. We'll obviously reconvene and pull this up. But yeah, most people have the Knicks around the play-in. We mentioned, how much went wrong last season, and we know the East got stronger, but the point guard play is going to play a huge key. And Mark and EJ, is there any X factor player that'll, allow this team to shoot above your, expectations? And who is that player, and what has to change?
Well, I had mentioned IQ earlier in the podcast, but I'm going to put out the backup center, Hardenstein. He was not on my radar when I did a few pieces on what free agent big man they could re-sign or they could sign in free agency, and he was not on my radar. I thought the Clippers would re-sign him. I'm surprised they didn't. I mean, Clippers are so deep right now, but that was a great pickup. The more I talk to people about him, he doesn't do anything great. He does everything well. Including shooting the three. It's just last season, the backup center position was such a disaster. Taj came in, but he's so old and he only does certain things. But when Noel plays 20 games or so, he was looked upon as a key piece. And he wasn't in his contract year and he had a terrible injury-racked season. He didn't want to practice. It was bad for morale. And Noel, really, it's great that he's off the team. I mean, they were happy, and then they had to, give up assets to get rid of him, to get rid of his contract. But Hardenstein does everything well. Good defender, decent shot blocker, very nice shooter. They didn't have that on the roster last year, a center who could shoot from the outside. So if he could. And EJ made a great point. Maybe you put him on the court down the end of in a close game down the stretch. So he could be a real X factor, someone that we definitely did not write about entering their off-season plans.
Yep. EJ?
For me, it's going to be D Rose. I think he's the epitome of an X factor. Sort of like what Mark said, Noel was unavailable the majority of last season. If Derrick Rose is unavailable this season, if he's going to be frequently injured, that's going to be a huge minus for the second unit. I think that Derrick Rose has the ability to help calm Emmanuel quickly. That maturity, that ability to be a veteran leader on the court, that ability to also feed your big man, to feed Isaiah Hartenstein, to give him that rock, and so that if he's going to play the end of the game, that he's in rhythm as opposed to like not getting shots because Emmanuel might be chucking up shots. I think that's going to be really important, having that steady veteran savvy. And also, you know, if he's not there, that means that you're trusting IQ, who at least at the beginning of this preseason, and throughout the preseason, made some questionable decisions. And so I would much rather trust Derrick Rose to lead that second unit and to kind of guide IQ as opposed to letting IQ run the show entirely by himself. So my big X factor is Derrick Rose.
That's a good one, EJ. I wish
Thank
I
you,
thought
sir.
of it.
A lot of good X factors. Mine has been RJ a lot along the way, but actually after seeing the preseason and some incredible improvement, I'm also going to include Quentin Grimes in this thing now. Moving forward for this club, his health is going to be critical, given what we saw from Cam, given what we know what Evan Fournier is. I mean, we can't go into this season with the burden relying on RJ Barrett to be that wing that guards the best wing for 38 minutes every single night without some help defensively on that wing spot. And you mentioned the picks, Mark. If the Knicks fall back in the lottery, what's a projection moving forward? What can you foresee the Knicks doing? They have 3 picks possibly this draft. It's going to be a crazy draft. We've seen the talent on display with Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, and the Knicks surely will be looking to see where they're at the trade deadline. There's going to be a lot of buyers and, you know, switching to sellers at that point in time.
Well, are the Knicks ever going to make their own lottery pick anymore? They still want to make a big trade. You know, some people in the organization are still disappointed that they couldn't pull off the Donovan deal, but the sense was there'll be other fish in the sea down the road, and we'll have a lot of draft capital. So if the Knicks are in the lottery again, it's another pawn to package in a trade. And, you know, they have Dallas's pick and they have a lot of draft picks, and they're going to have to pull the trigger on something, because you can't just be the 9th seed in the play-in tournament, and that can't be your ceiling. So I think that if the Knicks have another lottery pick, if their pick is the lottery pick, I think it's going to go in a trade. I think they're going to really zero in again on making a blockbuster trade. And I'll be surprised if they're in the top 8 when it's all said and done.
I would hope too that, and Mark, like, you know, all during the summer when CT and I would speak, you know, one of the things I would constantly say is my hope that the market resets, that crazy Minnesota Rudy Gobert trade that upset the market at some point when teams like, you know, like an LA needs to make a deal, that the market kind of like the high inflation that happened in the market will decrease some, so that if the Knicks decide we're not going to try to draft 3 major draft picks in this draft, they're able to actually hit a realistic target with 3 first-round picks. I mean, because I think that in anybody's NBA, that's a lot of assets to acquire some talent. It's just with that Rudy Gobert Minnesota trade, which I'm still looking for the answer, with whom were the Timberwolves competing to give up that many assets? Hopefully the market resets to allow for us to hit a realistic target.
Yep. And now we'll talk on some wider NBA. I'll get some quick thoughts from both of you on who makes it out of the East, Mark, EJ, who makes it out of the West for you, who wins it all, and give us your MVP, you know, most improved situation.
Definitely not the Nets. And I'm picking the Sixers to finally get out of the Eastern Conference. I feel Harden is maybe in a little better shape, but he knows his teammates now. Maxey is underrated. Tobias Harris is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. And I'm not just saying that because he's from Long Island. Embiid is a monster. And Doc Rivers. Listen, I think they're due. I just feel like this team is ready to burst forward, and it would be a great story, if that team gets to the finals. So that's my finals pick. MVP is always Giannis, even though he's not going to win it every year. It was like Shaq; he deserved to win it every year, but they weren't going to give it to him every year. So Giannis is an MVP, and most improved player is something that I probably need to think about a little more. But when you have a player like Maxey who continues to evolve, I know I'm only focused on the East right now, but I really like that kid. And on a very strong Sixers team, I think maybe some voters can look his way.
Yep.
This really puts me on the spot. In terms of coming out of the East, I'll start with the East, and I totally agree with Mark. I don't think that it's going to be Brooklyn. I just feel like there'll be some sort of KD something, or more likely a Kyrie implosion of some sort.
Or even a Ben disaster.
Oh yeah,
three things that will go wrong.
So I can't imagine a world where Brooklyn will get it together enough to make it out of the East. I agree with Mark. I think it's either going to come down to Milwaukee or Philly. For some reason, something tells me that there will be some sort of Milwaukee injury, somewhat similar to what happened last season. And they, even though Giannis will beast out, there will be something that impedes them from getting out of the conference final. So, and with Boston and Ime Udoka, again, that coaching situation, you don't necessarily know what to make of it, its impact. I think then it just leaves Philly to come out of it. Although, there is a part of me that says there is a year where Embiid is probably going to get injured. And if you're a Philly fan, you hope it's not this year, because I think the cards are kind of been dealt so that this could be the year for Philly to get out of the East. Likewise, you're thinking likely the Clippers or Golden State to come out of the West. Everyone I'm seeing wants the Clippers, but the Clippers just seem like that kind of team where it's like they should be, but it's almost never them. So I'm going to quickly say it's going to be Golden State. I'm going to say that Golden State will repeat. In terms of your MVP, I'm going to say Joker. Simply because of what took place. It's either going to be Joker, and I know Mark's going to say choose one. Actually, I'll say Luka. I'll say Luka.
Oh,
Luka.
Yep.
Yeah.
High usage.
High usage.
I think. Yep. I think Milwaukee make it out. I think they're being slept on, but I like Mark's pick. That I think the Sixers, this is their year. I mean, Harden looks motivated. He took less. He's in shape, and I think you have to look at Golden State. I mean, they re-upped incredibly their luxury tax bill, Mark, in EJ. It has to be the highest luxury tax bill, I think, in history, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they that owner is willing to spend, but they make so much money with that new arena in San Francisco, right downtown by the water. But I will say the NBA probably would hope Golden State doesn't make it. I feel there's a Warriors fatigue. In fact, ESPN doesn't. They don't even have a writer who covers Golden State on a daily basis right now. But
wow.
I didn't pick a Western team. I'd love to see the Nuggets finally do it. As you mentioned, Joker before. I feel they're due also, and they got back their point guard. And Mike Malone is a great coach and a great guy and a former Knicks assistant coach. I'd love to see the Nuggets get to the finals. I think it would be good for the NBA. But CT, what was your predictions?
Yeah, so I think Milwaukee make it out. I feel like Golden State make it out again. I like Embiid for the MVP. I like MVP, and I think Tyrese Maxey can win Most Improved again. He's going to get a lot of usage and a lot of shine well. And before I hit you, gentlemen, with a bold prediction with the Knicks. Salute to the chat, everyone here. Thanks for rocking with us. Smash that like button, and gentlemen, with the Knicks this season, Mark, give us a bold prediction that you could see happening and a safe bet for this season coming up.
Yeah, I don't know how bold the prediction is, but Jalen as an all-star. Again, the Knicks would have to be a 500 team or a little better. But I think, the coaches would see how different that franchise looks when there's a floor general on the court as opposed to in recent years. So I could see him getting a reserve, voted in as an alternate. He's also a great kid, and coaches really like his leadership. A safe pick was
Safe
other,
bet.
Oh, a safe bet. A safe bet is Mitchell Robinson shooting at least 68% from the field. I mean, everything is a putback dunk or, a inside alley-oop, or, he's never shooting more than 3 feet away from the basket. So his efficiency is amazing. Obviously, he broke Will Chamberlain's field goal percentage. I think he'll do it again. I don't think we're going to see a 3-point shot from him again this season either.
Wow.
But I like those picks. Well done. EJ, safe bet, bold prediction.
It's hard to follow, Mark. So hard. Okay, so my bold prediction. I'm reaching here. Hot take. I don't think Julius finishes the season with the Knicks. I think if Jalen has an incredible season, if he's in all-star consideration, that means that he's doing well enough to also influence Julius's game, and that likely increases Julius's stock, which makes certain teams that are in contention more interested in Julius as a possible acquisition, where he doesn't have to fake the role of as a number one. Perhaps in the right situation, he doesn't even have to be a number two. He can be a 2B. And I think the front office will jump at the opportunity to trade Julius, perhaps with an asset. But if it's a deal that they can save face and create more clarity in roster roles, I think they're definitely going to jump on it. So if Jalen is in all-star consideration, I think Julius does not finish the season with the Knicks, and I think he'll even be happy with that. So that's my bold take. My safe bet is that Obi will be in the dunk contest.
Was it fourth year running?
Yes, I think that is an absolute safe bet. I think, especially because he's a young kid who understands the appeal of being a New York star, not necessarily an all-star, but understanding the idea of being in commercials, the ideas of having that appeal. And this will be yet another way for him to continue to have his name out there, especially if he's not accruing the minutes he would like to, with Julius being ahead of him in the depth charts. But I do predict he will definitely say yes to the dunk contest and likely win it.
It would be his third straight year, and I think you're on the money there.
Thank you very much. I had to think of something on the fly because you took mine.
Slam dunk champion, maybe coming for Nate Robb's crown. And salute to Nate Robb, and we wish him well and prayers up for him. We know Nate Robinson's battling some health concerns there. But for me, bold prediction was that Mitchell Robinson's going to be in the all-defensive team conversation. All-defensive team. The health is a major thing. Marky seems to cut down on the foul situation. If he can play 30-plus minutes on a regular basis, he's going to be a force.
And what about your safe bet?
Yep. My safe bet was the Knicks make the play-in.
Ooh.
Yep. I think it's a pretty safe bet. I think there's going to be a lot of sellers at the deadline. We see the stuff going on in Charlotte as well. Charlotte, the Knicks beat Washington. KP's health is a major concern. Does Bradley Beal, is this the year that he maybe, looks elsewhere? We'll see. You know,
He has the
it's
money.
going to be
He can do it.
fascinating.
Yeah, listen, Vegas will disagree with you, but I just feel too many things went wrong last year, and I listen. Jeff Van Gundy. Well, I spoke to him a couple of months ago, and I think Zach Braziller spoke to him a few days ago. He thinks it would be a huge accomplishment for the Knicks to make the play-in, and to me, that's Jeff sort of putting less pressure on his buddy Tom Thibodeau, because this roster is enough to be a top 10. And listen, this is Leon Rose's third year. So, to make the play-in is not like something to throw a parade down Broadway. I mean, to be a ninth seed, 3 years ago meant you're straight in the lottery. But for Jeff Van Gundy to make it seem like what a great accomplishment if this roster gets in the top 10, I think is overstating it.
Yeah, I agree. But he may have also been referencing how strong the East is.
Yes, he was.
Well.
He is and was. But still, I mean, they should be in the 10 or 9.
Yep. No, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating season. I'm hyped. I'm excited, as Nick Nation is. The streets are certainly buzzing. Smash that like button. And Mark, EJ, it's been a pleasure having you on, to chop this thing up. And I'm sure we'll talk throughout the regular season. And Mark, again, what can I say? We got to give you your flowers for 23 years covering the Knicks as well. It's great to have you with us now as a fan. No pressure. You can sit back, just enjoy the games, observe from afar, and of course, maybe drop that occasional jewel on Twitter. Drop us an occasional dime.
Yeah,
And
I plan to maybe weigh in once in a blue moon. But yeah, it's a lot of fun being in Florida. 85 degrees every day in October, and it's just a slower pace out here. It's a different vibe. But yeah, I miss New York a little bit, but I'm really enjoying life out in Florida.
I gotta jump in here and just say this really quickly. 2 quick things. I said this in my tweet to you. It's kind of funny what Mitch said and how it works and how apropos it is. So Berman, in your retirement, relax.
Exactly.
Relax. But seriously, Mark, I mean, I've had the pleasure of having this conversation with you before. You have raised an entire generation worth of Knicks fans. And, there isn't a Knicks buzz, there isn't all these other podcasts if it isn't for the work that you established and did for over 2 decades. And, helping Knicks fans, particularly before the internet, when we were running to rush to get the New York Post and the other New York paper that we're not going to mention in your presence, to get our fix, in terms of Knicks content and Knicks information. And, you're really, at least for me, I can speak for myself as a Knicks fan, and so many people I know, those 90s Knicks, it was Mike Francesa and Chris Mad Dog Russo, but it was also reading you and the other gentleman, Frank Isola, I have to give him his credits too. But you helped raise us and give us so much information and so much knowledge about our favorite team. So I salute you, and I thank you so much for being the kind of man that you are. So Godspeed in your retirement, man.
Thanks so much, EJ and CT. I really appreciate those kind words. It's really very emotional for me to hear all these kind thoughts. And the Knicks fans in general are amazing. And, for 23 seasons, every season they were as psyched and as pumped to read about the club, no matter how bad they were. And I was always amazed. It's so different. I mean, listen, the Brooklyn Nets, I mean, I talk to people who write about the Brooklyn Nets, and they say sometimes you feel like you're riding into a vacuum. But these Knicks fans, no matter how bad the team is, they care so much. And that's what made the job so much easier.
Yeah, they're global. I mean, I'm out here in Australia rocking this since a young boy, 8 years old, watching them on TV. Like I said, looking at your stories in the Post as well. 50 years, it's the 50-year anniversary, right, of the championship.
Yeah.
We're still here. Knicks fans are still optimistic, still strong, still loyal. I mean, you're probably still getting emails. Mark, you said you just got an email. People are still emailing you.
Yeah.
They can hit you up on Twitter. But yeah, your work speaks for itself. You leave behind a legacy of everything you've done in those 23 years. We may never see another beat writer, cover the team for that long. So, you're certainly up there with the GOAT conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, if someone lasts 23 years in this digital age, I'd be I feel sorry for that person. I'll be honest. The digital age has made it even tougher. But yeah, it was a great 23 years, and I'll always have tremendous memories. And you guys have been terrific, and you guys, put on such a great show. And there's a lot of podcasts out there, but I feel that yours really hits the issues as hard as any other show out there, and it's a great credit. And to do CT at all hours of the day from Australia, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
No, appreciate it. Yeah, it's the hype and the fan base, the excitement that gets me here, and the camaraderie as well, and the excitement. Yeah, we love this game, and that's what got you through the 23 years
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, happy retirement. We hope to talk to you soon. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen, and chat Knicks Nation. There's plenty of content coming this season. Plenty of guests. EJ, myself, Mark, occasionally whenever he wants to come through, is going to come through as well. We wish everyone well, happy, safe blessings, and a big season for these New York Knicks. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace, gentlemen.
Happy birthday, CT.